We are introduced to Kanata, who has just made the horrible mistake of going on a date with Crazy. If it wasn't already clear, those 38 stab wounds were fatal, so Kanata gets isekai'd in the worst possible way. But things don't get any better for him in his next life either, as he wakes up to find this old, ugly goblin staring at him. He doesn't understand what's going on, but it seems he has been reborn as one of them, so the elder gives him a new name, Gobro. The old man then proceeds to shove a big and juicy maggot down his throat for that bonus protein. And since Gobro is a baby, he can't speak or refuse anything. By day 2, he woke up to find himself surrounded by tons of ugly green babies, and he is faced with the reality that he is just as ugly as them. He comes to terms with the fact that he died and was reborn as this weak and helpless baby, so he spends the rest of the day crying over the loss of his beautiful human face. By day 3, he realizes that goblins seem to mature way faster than humans do, but that doesn't change the fact that he is still bald though. At least he is able to move and speak again now. So while it's not ideal, he chooses to make the best of the new life he has been given and heads out to face the world. On day 4, the now mostly grown goblins meet with the elder once more as he is holding a platter of maggots for them. He tells them he is done with taking care of them since they are freeloaders, so after today, they are on their own when it comes to finding food to eat. Gobro doesn't like the idea of eating maggots willingly, but it's pure protein, so he scarfs them down regardless. Afterwards, he now has to head out into the world all on his own, and as he exits the cave, he finds a beautiful world with unfamiliar plants and animals all around. One other goblin that had followed him is scared to be outside for the first time ever, so Gobro tries to reassure him by saying it's his first time seeing this place as well. The other goblin is Gobakichi, and although he is not very smart, Gobro decided to team up with him for one very important reason. He got the bulk genetics, so he's going to be helpful in hunting for food. They find a rabbit in the forest, so Gobro sends Gobakichi to attack it from the front. The rabbit runs away from him, but this was all part of the plan as Gobro had set himself up in a nearby tree, so as soon as the rabbit got within range, he leaps down from the tree and snaps the bunny's spine with that stick. This hunting strategy is really effective, but after the bunny has been caught, Gobakichi started getting a little greedy over the bunny, so Gobro had to smack some sense into him so he knows who's in charge here. After giving him a good dose of domestic abuse, Gobro begins prepping the bunny so it can be ready for their dinner. He snaps the rabbit's corn off, and after inspecting it, he figures he should be able to make a decent weapon out of this thing. Just then, he sees a notification in his head, and he doesn't know what to make of it since the elder never gave a tutorial on this. But his thoughts are cut off as Gobakichi has recovered and is salivating for his share of meat. Gobro conceives and pulls out the meat, which Gobakichi proceeds to gobble up with gratitude. On the 5th day, the two continue their hunting strategy, and Gobro has successfully implemented that rabbit horn as a weapon. As he takes a new horn from the rabbit, he receives a notification in his head again, but he's still not sure what it's supposed to be. He sits down to eat some meat, but once he takes a bite, his eyes begin to glow blue, and he is informed that he has acquired an escape skill from the rabbit. It all makes sense to him now as he recalls that in his past life, he had the rare ability of absorption, which allowed him to have a chance of absorbing the abilities of anything he eats. Although he still has absorption, it seems that all the other abilities he managed to gain have been reset since he is in a new body. It's still pretty lucky that he got to keep a skill at all, so he's okay with how things have played out since there are plenty of monsters lurking in the forest that he can eat to gain power. By day 6, Gobro has already started attracting girls with his impressive meat. She is amazed that he and Gobakichi had managed to capture horned rabbits when others have died trying to do the same. And since she actually has hair, it is officially confirmed that goblins can have follicles, but Gobro and Gobakichi are just bald. Gobro asks if she would like to participate in their hunt for the next day, and she was overjoyed at the offer. But on the 7th day, it rains so much that they had to postpone their hunt. Since he has nothing better to do, Gobro decides to go check out what they've got in storage since he has never been back here before. However, he wasn't prepared for what he would see there. He found a group of captive human women, which proves that even in this world, Goblin Slayer was right all along. He's just going to try to ignore it, so he spends his time crafting a weapon instead. The goblin elder named Gabji comes over to him since he seems to be oddly motivated to survive. At this rate, he believes Gobro might level up faster than expected. Gobro didn't know there was a level system here, so Gabji tells him to tap his forehead so he can see it. After doing so, Gobro sees that the elder is currently at level 86, and he mentions that if one manages to reach level 100, then they'll be able to evolve into a higher being. However, goblins age so fast that even though he's only in his 20s, look way too old. As he leaves, he tells Gobro that he'll get to see what an evolved hobgoblin looks like when the promising youngsters return from the village, but something doesn't sit right with Gobro. The next day, it was clear out, so Gobro went out hunting with the other two. Their teamwork is outstanding considering they are only a week old, with Gobmi as backup, Gobro as their mid-range attacker, and Gobakishi as their forward. With this formation, they were able to get themselves a large haul of meat, and Gobmi is brought to tears as she takes a bite due to how thick and juicy it is. Gobro takes a bite as well, and he ends up learning several new skills from snake meat. The next day, they kept hunting, but by day 11, they made the mistake of going into an unknown cave, and they found themselves staring down a huge swarm of vampire bats. They immediately start running away, but the bats are too fast, so Gobakichi and Gobro stay behind to deal with them. They were getting overwhelmed at first, but then Gobro uses the evil eye skill he acquired and freezes all the bats in place. With all the bats frozen in place, they then proceed to kill all of them, and afterwards they dine on their corpses. Gobro gains some new skills from eating the bat meat, including echolocation, vamp up, vamphilia, and COVID-19. As they continue to eat like kings, they are watched by some of the other goblins, who are starving since they are too dumb to successfully hunt on their own. That night, they attempted to take their frustrations out on him since obviously, he's the one with the problem, not them. If they put this much effort into catching food, then maybe they wouldn't be so hungry, but they fail to account for the fact that Gobro has a search ability, so he could sense them approaching. He counterattacked them, and although he didn't really intend to kill anyone, he miscalculated on the amount of his venom skill to use, so one of the attacking goblins ended up dead. He didn't seem to care though, as he still wanted to teach them a lesson for trying to assassinate him. However, Gobmi shows up, and after what she did to them for attacking her precious Gobro, even Gobro feels sorry for them. The next day, they head out to hunt again and are planning a coordinated jumping on this orc. It was just minding its own business when they throw a rock in its eye, and while it's blinded, Gobakichi rushes in. The orc knocks him back with its pickaxe, but immediately after, its fingers get smashed by another rock. They then proceed to claim its kneecaps by inverting the bend of its knees with a club. And to finish off, Gobro stabs it in the head several times. After the orc has been killed, they enjoy its meat, but since they got a lot left over, Gobro decides they should take it all back to the cave, since there is something he wants to do. Once they've brought all the excess back, Gobro calls the attention of all the broke and starving goblins and tells them that they can eat as much as they want as meat. After some initial hesitation, one after the other, all the goblins drop to their knees and begin gobbling up Gobro's delicious meat. As he watches them, Gobro thinks about how he would never have helped people out like this in his past life, but maybe being reincarnated changed more than just his body. That night, after everyone has gone to sleep, Gobro is laying down and trying to do the same, but the notifications in his head won't stop playing. It says he has exceeded the level requirement, so he will be evolving into a hobgoblin soon. However, he wasn't paying attention to it since he was so sleepy. The next morning, something strange happens as Gobro wakes up and discovers that he now looks different. He is confused why his appearance seems to have changed again overnight, plus he looks a lot more similar to the way he did before he reincarnated. And more importantly, he is no longer bald. The same thing seems to have happened to Gobakichi as well, and Gami, although she stayed the same. She is loving the new look on her friends. The elder comes over to see what all the commotion is about, and he is shocked to find that both Gobro and Gobakichi have managed to evolve when they were literally born 2 weeks ago. Gobakichi gets Gobro's attention and says he would like to test out how much stronger he has gotten. But hunting won't be enough to satisfy him, so he wants to have a fight with Gobro himself. Gobro was up for the challenge, so the two head out to begin their match. They both begin boxing out in the forest, and Gobakichi is definitely a whole lot stronger than he was before, but he still lacks the combat skills necessary to be able to take Gobro down in a fight, as Gobro is able to slip under a punch and sweep his legs out from under him. Gobakichi admits defeat and praises Gobro for being so strong, but Gobro gives him credit as well, since when it comes to power, Gobakichi is stronger than anyone else here. Just then, Gobro hears some wolf noises off in the distance, and he can tell that something bad is going to happen soon. He calls for Gami, who is hiding nearby, to spy on them, and tells her that she should go get the crossbow they had made earlier because they are going to be needing it soon. Wolves are chasing a bunch of rabbits down the hill, and once they have successfully killed their prey, they lock on to their next unsuspecting target, a probably innocent orc that was just minding his own business. The orc starts running for its life, but the wolves aren't about to let it get away so easily, so they start chasing it down until they eventually catch up and tear it to pieces. Gobro and Gobakichi watch this all go down, and they think the wolves will be the perfect opponent to test out how strong they have truly become since they evolved. Gobro signals to Gobmi to begin firing at the wolves with a crossbow, and once the leader is taken down, both Gobro and Gobakichi rush in to start smashing in the wolves. Without their leader, the wolves' teamwork was completely gone, so they were able to make quick work of them and slaughtered every single one. Afterwards, there was just the leader wolf left standing, but he too would eventually succumb to the wounds he sustained. After he collapsed, Gobro approached and opened his mouth to take a huge bite out of the wolf, allowing him to gain some extra skills, including one leadership skill. Gobro takes the rest of the dead wolves back to the cave and tells the other goblins that they are free to eat as much as they want, but from now on, he expects them to catch their own food. They don't have the confidence to accomplish something like that, so they all get down on their knees and beg Gobro to teach them how to hunt for themselves. He agrees to train them in the ways of hunting if they don't know how, and if they need weapons, he'll teach them how to make those as well. This gets everyone to like him a lot, so he is cemented in as the leader of the goblins. It may partially be because of his leadership skill, but that doesn't matter to him. He will work hard to lead his comrades, and he'll continue to eat and gain new skills as he goes, all for the sake of achieving his goal. Day 17. Gobro wakes Gobji up from his nap to inform him of an incident. All the human women whom they had locked in the basement realize that Goblin Slayer isn't coming to save them. So rather than spending the rest of their lives as breeding slaves, they offer themselves with poison, so Gobro and Gobji hold a memorial and burn the bodies. By day 23, Gobro had begun training all the goblins in the ways of not sucking at being a goblin. And while he was doing this, he also spent some time hunting and eating any and all monsters that would provide him with useful skills, so he has got quite the arsenal of skills at his disposal now. Just then, he notices several figures approaching from a distance, and while they may look like goblins, he's not the type to trust strangers blindly, so he draws his sword and prepares to cut them down. However, he is stopped by Gobji, who tells him that those goblins are the fathers of the current generation of goblins, and they're home with the milk. Gobji is happy with the haul of food the old goblins returned with, and they also happen to capture some more women to be used for breeding, so Gobji is rather glad about that as well. Goblin DNA is so strong that even if they mate with other species, it will still result in a goblin baby, and while Gobro can understand the instinct to reproduce, he still has to admit that this is really messed up and he needs to do something about it. He goes over to the biggest hobgoblin of the older generation and asks if he can be in charge of taking care of the women, but the old goblin gets angry because he wanted to take them for himself. Gobro isn't one to back down, so a fight was about to break out between the two, and both generations were ready to jump in to help at a moment's notice. But before the bloodbath began, it got broken up by two other goblins. They would prefer it if they didn't cause a civil war to break out between the generations, so they suggest that the two people with beef settle it in a way that won't get them involved. These two are Hobsato and Hobsi, and they suggest that the leaders of both generations have a battle to settle the dispute, so the winner will get to decide what the village does from now on. They also make a rule banning weapons, so that no one ends up dying, and the older goblin agrees to the term, not knowing he's about to get his ass beat. And a couple minutes later, we see clear evidence that the older goblin indeed got his ass beaten. Gobro has him tied up in a spider's web, but he assures everyone that this doesn't count as cheating, since the webs aren't a weapon. He produces it from his body like Toby's Spider-Man thanks to a skill he got earlier, so with the current alpha tied up and beaten, Gobro has been crowned the new leader of the village, and no one dares to object because they don't want to end up like the old leader. Later, Gobro goes and tells the captured women that he has instructed all the goblins not to lay a hand on them, and he won't be touching them either, so they have nothing to worry about. He'll make sure they are well taken care of, and eventually he'll see to it that they are sent back to a human village. The girls are relieved to hear that they will be alright, but there has to be some kind of catch to a deal like this, so one asks Gobro what he wants them to do in exchange for their freedom. Gobro does feel bad for them, but that's not the only reason he chose to help them out. He has no other way to get any information on the matter, so he tells them that all he wants is to learn about the human world here. So after talking with them for a bit, he finds out that these women were part of a traveling merchant group, but when they were attacked by the goblins, all their men were slaughtered, and these 5 were the only ones who survived the attack, only to be captured and brought here. They start to cry after being forced to relive the tragedy they went through, but it's not like Gobro can say, "Sorry, my people wiped out your friends and family," so he just gets up and walks away. A couple days pass, and the women seem to be more cheerful regarding their current situation, but it's probably just their way of coping. From the time he has spent with them, he has learned that humans in this world don't evolve the same way monsters do, but in exchange, they are able to take on multiple jobs. The red-haired one seems to be a rookie adventurer as far as Gobro can tell, but she's pretty weak as far as warriors go, so he may have her join the goblins in training later. Speaking of training, Gobro made all the older goblins join in on the training as well, and it doesn't matter how old they are. If they get pissy with him, he's going to smack some sense into them. For the next few days, Gobro focused on group exercises so that he could teach all the goblins the new rules he had set for them, and you can tell the former leader is not happy about it, but he can't go against Gobro's decisions anymore. On the 31st day, it was rainy, so everyone stayed inside. Everything was perfectly normal, but then Gobro's detection skill alerted him to some goblins heading towards the human women, and he knows what that means. The former leader has gathered a couple of his buddies, and they were planning to have some fun with the humans, but Gobro shows up behind them, and he distinctly remembers spending a couple days going over the rules with them. But it looks like some people never learn, so he's going to have to teach the old man another lesson. The women wake up to the sound of Gobro killing one of the insubordinate goblins, and they are obviously scared. The other goblins had heard the commotion and rushed in to see what happened, so Gobro asks Gobmi to help him drag all the goblins he tied up outside and to tell everyone to gather around because there's something he wants to show them. That night in the pouring rain, Gobro proceeded to beat the rule-breaking goblins to death, leaving the former leader to suffer the worst fate as Gobro's personal punching bag until he was just barely alive, only to be left out in the rain to die a slow and painful death. With this, Gobro asks if everyone understands the rules and what will happen if they break the rules, and no one dares to say a word. The next day, it's back to the regular hunting, and the group is up against a trekhorn with scales that make it almost really difficult to pierce. The trekhorn charges at Gobro, but he uses his spider silk to trap it in place, and with it immobilized, both he and Gobakichi were able to target its weak points and kill it fairly easily. After it has been defeated, Gobro and the others eat the meat, and he gains several new skills. One of which is a skill called Triple Strike, and even though he is doing it himself, Gobro still has no idea how the extra 2 strikes are being generated, but he's not going to question it. That night, while Gobro was in bed, the red-haired human came up to him and just climbed into bed with him. Nothing unholy took place that night because she was probably still just scared from what had happened the previous night, so Gobro let her sleep in his bed. However, by morning time, Gobmi had gotten jealous, so she climbed into Gobro's bed as well. In other news, the Goblin Gobro had assigned to be carrying all the equipment managed to evolve as well due to all the manual labor, so she is now relevant to the plot as well. The training of the goblins has been divided into different units, with Gobakichi handling the armored units, Gobmi handling the ranged units, and Hobsato handling the regular fighters. And now that Gob has evolved, she handles the training of the support goblins. Meanwhile, Hobse is busy doing absolutely nothing because she is the only mage among the goblins, meaning there's no one for her to train. Gobro decided to leave the training of the goblins to the appointed captains while he heads deep into the forest to hunt some strong prey. While there, he spots another trekhorn in the distance, and since he has the element of surprise, he decides to try using a magic skill he had acquired previously, casting Phase 1 Demise Magic. And once his attack hits, the trekhorn that they had had so much trouble defeating earlier was easily destroyed in a split second. That landslide victory may have made him a little too overconfident because he then decided further north into the forest, but only once he had gone in really deep did he remember what Gobji had told him a couple days after he was born last month. He was explicitly warned never to go into the northern part of the forest, because in there lives a crimson creature called the Red Bear, and now he has come face to face with said Red Bear due to his carelessness. Any rational being would have already started running away, but even though he can't guarantee it, Gobro still believes that he may be able to take this thing down if he comes up with a plan. He wants to kill and eat the bear to gain even more skills, so he activates his demise magic and gets ready to throw everything he has at the bear. Back at the cave, Gobmi is getting worried since she hasn't seen Gobro all day, and neither has anyone else since he left their training session that morning. But the others aren't really worried since Gobro is strong enough that he'll probably be fine even if he gets himself into trouble. But I don't know if he has a plan for this because the bear managed to dodge the attacks. It lost an arm in the process, but it's still every bit as dangerous as it was before, so Gobro can tell that if he gets hit by one of those claw strikes, even the refined scales armor skill he got from the tricorn wouldn't be of any use to him. So since he can't afford to take a single hit, he resolves to kill the bear as soon as possible. However, even after striking it in the skull with an axe, the bear still keeps chugging along, so Gobro is forced to step back and try something different. He attempts to use his spider webs to trap the bear, but is too strong for that and breaks itself free. The bear then activates one of its own skills and launches a wave of fire at Goblin, which sets the whole forest ablaze. The bear begins walking away since it assumes there is no way Goblin survived that attack. But despite that blast of fire being around 2,000 degrees hot, Goblin still managed to survive, so after getting to cover, he begins healing his arm while he thinks about his situation. He has never heard of such a thing as a fire-breathing bear before, so it looks like in order to take this thing down, he is going to have to be willing to take some amount of damage. He heads back out as the bear is leaving and baits it into launching a fire blast at him once again. But this time, he has come up with a plan to counter it and uses water magic to block the inferno, while he continues to charge forward. The bear's body is too hard to pierce normally from the outside, but it's probably a different story when it comes to the inside of the bear's mouth, so Goblin stabs his sword through the bear's mouth, leading to a wound which he assumes will be fatal. However, he gets snapped out of his confident smirk when the bear smacks him across the forest and into a tree. Goblin managed to take an arm from the bear, slash it across the head and stab it through its mouth, but is still showing no signs of collapsing. However, after that one strike, Goblin is on the verge of death and will definitely croak if he takes another one of those hits. But that just makes it more exciting for him. He charges back in and raises his axe to strike the bear, while the bear readies its claws to strike as well. But once the clash is over, one of Goblin's arms is seen flying through the air. The bear had indeed managed to rip his arm off, but at the end of the day, Goblin was still alive, even if he is barely a step above passing out dead. He grabs the bear claw that is impaling him and takes a bite out of it, gaining 2 new abilities, but he succumbs to his wounds and passes out afterward. He then receives a notification that the level requirements have been reached, so he is allowed to evolve into a rare ogre class, which he immediately accepts. After some time, he wakes up and finds he has evolved yet again. His hand is regenerating. Thus, when he returns to the other goblins, they are all in shock by how he has become. Gabi scolds him for being away and making them worry. She tries to leg kick him, but our boy stands there and takes it like a man while Gabi drops to the floor screaming in pain. Since Goblin became an ogre, Gabi had been following him around non-stop, but before he addresses that, he wants to get himself a change of clothes. As he enters the storage room, the women are frightened because they don't recognize him at first, but after he shows them his skills as proof of his identity, they calm down a bit. One of the human girls takes a look at an axe that's been heavily damaged, which she seems happy to fix, and while Goblin is here, she informs him that she made a knife out of a magic stone, so she would like him to check it out. Goblin is impressed by all her hard work, so he gives her a pat on the head, and Stockholm Syndrome must be hitting her hard because she loves it. On the other hand, Gabi and the redhead girl hate it as they are jealous that Goblin is giving another girl his attention. Goblin then goes over to the twins to see how they are doing, but the work they have to do is a bit much for just the 2 of them to handle, so they ask Goblin if they can get a few extra hands to help. Since they asked, Goblin decides that he can tell a couple of the goblin girls to come help over here, and the twins are happy to hear it, but even Goblin is amazed how quickly they started liking goblins despite literally having their entire family killed by them a week ago. He jokes that they would make great wives, and the girls don't seem like they are opposed to the idea, but Redhead and Gabi certainly are. Next, he goes to check on the green-haired girl who has been busy making potions. He takes a look at one of the vials and he can tell it is poison, which the girl doesn't deny. She had made it for protection and was initially planning to squad wipe all the goblins by poisoning the food, but then she learned that there were trustworthy goblins like him, so she doesn't intend to use it anymore. The next day, Goblin realized that he could no longer do his regular training because in his ogre state, even holding back against the other goblins nearly kills them, so he'll refrain from fighting them anymore. Gobikichi takes the loss really hard and decides to go hunting to clear his head, and while Goblin is worried about him, he also knows he's got to give him some alone time. The rest of the day was spent with everyone going through their normal routines, and for once Goblin got a chance to just relax as he passed the time by sewing next to Hobbsy. Even though he lost an arm in his fight with the red bear, it hasn't really slowed him down all that much since he has a slime skill to make up for it. But that aside, he tells Hobbsy that he would like to get his book back so he can finish reading it, but she just ignores him completely and just keeps reading it. The next day, Goblin was casually eating lunch when Gob came running to him with an injured carbuncle in her arms. Goblin tries healing it first, but it has lost a lot of blood, so he says he'll have to ask the alchemist to make something to help her. After the treatment is done, the carbuncle wakes up and is confused about her current situation and who all these strange people around her are. They explain everything to her, So the carbuncle is grateful to them for saving her life even though she is a stranger to them. She says her name is Returner and she was attacked by some humans not too long ago, which is how she ended up in that state. Apparently, the gemstone in the forehead of a carbuncle is worth a lot of money, approximately 1 billion gold coins, so it's no wonder that they are trying so hard to kill her for it. She asks Gobro to please help her chase away the adventurers that are after her because she is not going to live much longer. Returner is an artificial carbuncle created by a legendary wizard long ago with the purpose of guarding the treasure of said wizard. However, during the attack, the core that keeps her alive was heavily damaged, so there's no way she'll survive much longer at this rate. Her master held a major grudge against humans while he was alive, so even in death, he would rather let his legendary treasures go to a bunch of goblins rather than let humans get their grubby little mitts on them. So if Gobro helps her get rid of those adventurers, then she'll gladly hand over all the contents of the treasury to him. This is a golden opportunity, so Gobro's not going to let it slip through his fingers so easily. He calls for everyone to gather around and tells them all that they will be going to this treasury today to chase away some humans. He asks the blacksmith girl if she has the spirit stone knife she was talking about the other day, so she gives it to him. He doesn't normally use a knife, but he thinks it would be better than going in empty-handed if his goal is to intimidate them. The goblin squad all head into the treasury the carbuncle talked about, and once inside, Gobro asked Gobakichi and the others to hide first so he could try to negotiate with humans. He walked around looking for the adventurers on his own. But then those same adventurers cornered him out of nowhere. They grumble amongst themselves about having it deal with an ogre as well now, but they just decide to get rid of it as quickly as possible. An assassin tries to go in for a stealthy kill, but Gobro sees it comes a mile away and is able to block the strike with his bare hand. The adventurers are shocked that the assassin's concealment was seen through so easily, but then Gobro interrupts them and yells that they are in someone else's home right now, but they are trying to steal from it and even nearly killed its guardian. And on top of that, they don't seem to think there's anything wrong with what they are doing. But they are in luck today because Gobro is a nice guy and will give them a chance to spare themselves some pain. They start attacking him, but they are so weak that he can dodge their strikes effortlessly, so he still gives them the offer to turn around and walk away before things get ugly. Unfortunately, humans are known for their sudden lack of brain cells when thinking is necessary, so despite the fact that Gobro is very clearly out of their league, they keep attacking until he finally loses patience and is ready to crack some heads. It is finally starting to sink in for the adventurers that they shouldn't have messed with Gobro, but it's already too late to go back as Gobro uses his earth magic to trap them in place and calls for the others to begin jumping these guys. After they were done beating up the adventurers, they stripped them of everything they had on them and kicked them all out. So Gobro decides to eat all the loot and ends up gaining the skills of the items as well. He is now able to summon an item box that can store over 100,000 items in it. Since he has held up his end of the bargain, Returner leads Gobro and the others to the treasure room where her master took his final breaths amongst all of his cool stuff. This was the great wizard, Velvet, and Returner says he was quite well versed in conversing with the spirits, which is why he was able to gather such a large quantity of spirit stones. Her time has come to an end, so she once again thanks Gobro and the others for their help and disappears in his hand, leaving behind her head gem, which Gobro eats. They all take a moment of silence for Returner, but after that's fine, they start looting the place for anything that looks like it could be valuable, and his new item box came in handy with this part. But before they left, Gobro felt bad about leaving the body out in the open like this, so he decides it would be best if he burned it. And as he does so, the body turns to ash, leaving behind a gauntlet, which Gobro doesn't hesitate to put on. The gauntlet seems to be a legendary magic item, so once he equips it on his lost arm, it attaches itself to him and replaces his missing arm. The arm has some really cool features, including the ability to rotate as well as produce poison and strings. But most importantly, it can function like a regular hand as well. The next day, Gobro spent a lot of time assessing all the gear they got from the treasury, and considering it was collected by a legendary wizard, everything is top of the line in power, so the following day, Gobro distributed the magic items to the 15 hobgoblins among the group. He kept this vermilion spear as well as a legendary magic bracelet for himself, so in total, he now has 3 legendary magic items all to himself. On day 40, Gobro decided to hold a series of battles to determine the ranks among the different hobgoblins. The day after that, Gobro headed out early in the morning to go hunt some prey he has never fought before. First was the golden spider, which he took out in one punch, and after eating its meat, he received another skill that allows him to create golden threads. As he continues walking through the forest, he ends up under a tree that's bathed in light, and this is kind of a problem for him since this is the home of a species called dryads. They prey on the men of intelligent races and seduce them into becoming a nutrient supply. Goblin had told Gobro about them, and he personally wants to go out while being sucked dry by a dryad. But Gobro would never go for something so lecherous. Or at least that's what he tells himself, because the second a dryad appears and starts getting up close and personal, Gobro merely folds on the spot. He tries to think about this calmly, but then he remembers that he is still a virgin in this world, so all reason gets thrown out the window as Gobro activates his sacred skill, the Golden PP. The dryad is amazed by the length and girth of what she sees before her, and I can't get into detail, but a lot of stuff happened within the next 5 hours. And by the time they were done, the dryad was asking him to come back again soon for another round. Gobro then heads over to a nearby waterfall to wash himself off, but he was soon surrounded by a squad of lizardmen for no reason. So he killed them, along with everything else that tried to attack him. The next day, Gobro found out there were 2 goblins who had the ability to become mages, so he sent them to be trained under Habse. But he can't say he likes the look on her face when she thinks about getting to teach other goblins. In other news, all the girls in the cave are suddenly mad at Gobro, and he can't figure out why since none of them will tell him. He ends up going to the green-haired girl to ask for some advice since she seems to be the most level-headed person here. So she tells him that everyone is mad because they know he went to Pound Town recently. The dryad left some very recognizable marks on his body, so they are jealous that he didn't choose him first. The green-haired girl feels the same way as well, but rather than take the jealous, silent treatment approach, she chooses to be a little more proactive with her feelings. We've already seen that Gobro folds easier than a blanket in these kinds of situations, but Goblin refuses to let it happen. At least not unless she gets to join in as well, and everyone else has the same thoughts. A lot more happened that day, which required Gobro to put up a soundproof wall in his room, but he doesn't want to talk about it. The next morning, Gobro's detection skill alerts him to the approach of some enemies, and thanks to this skill improving, he is now able to identify the race and general strength of an opponent. He heads outside with Gobakichi and is confronted by a couple of elves who seem like they are going to be a real pain in the ass to deal with. They have a proposal to make, but the elves are being really high and mighty about it, considering the proposal is them asking for help. The elf's territory is about to be attacked by humans who wish to steal their treasure, so he wants to have the goblins fight to help defend against the attack. And in exchange, they'll be provided compensation. Goblin immediately thinks this is a good idea to help them since the compensation amounts to a couple of months' worth of food for the whole village. But while that may be true, Gobro still refuses the request regardless. The elves are shocked he would turn down what they thought was an unbeatable deal like this, but Gobro couldn't care less about their situation. And while he normally wouldn't be opposed to helping them out, their pompous demeanor irks him, so he wants nothing to do with them. The elf is angered and nearly draws his sword on Gobro, but Gobro immediately uses Conqueror's Hockey and brings the elf leader to his knees with the immense pressure. After this, he grabs the elf leader's neck and tells him to call off the archers surrounding this place if he wishes to continue having a non-crushed neck, and he isn't bluffing either. One of the archers attempts to fire an arrow into Gobro's head, but he catches it with his teeth and bites until it shatters to pieces. Gobro is turning down their offer partially because he's not in the mood to fight humans, but if they threaten his goblin village as well, then he might reconsider teaming up with the elves. But with that said, he uses his legendary spear to make it clear that he could kill everyone here in a second if he wanted to, but he'll let them go today. All the elves make a hasty retreat back to their tribe, and Gobro is sure they won't return here for a while after a scare like that. Or at least he hopes so. The next day, while out hunting, Gobro comes across a gray slime, so he defeats it with some fire magic and picks up its core so he can munch on it. After eating the slime, Gobro unlocks the abilities of physical damage resistance, fluid regeneration, and auto-replication. Auto-replication is an ability that allows Gobro to create a copy of himself using any of his body fluids. He tests it out by using a drop of his blood, and after a few seconds, a mini Gobro is formed. He is able to share his senses with this miniature version of himself, so he comes up with the idea to have clothes made for all the women he cares about, but with his blood mixed into the lining so that it can act as a way to contact him if they are ever in trouble. The next day, Gobro had one of his blood children keeping a lookout for any suspicious behavior, and it just so happened to see the elves approaching once more, but this time it looks like the leader has brought a whole army with him this time. It seems like he didn't learn his lesson last time, so Gobro is done with mercy for now. As the elves approach the entrance of the cave, they are immediately immobilized by Gobro's roar, after which he steps out and uses his webs to tie all of them up. The prisoners are all brought inside, where Gobro gives the leader one last chance to make it out of this by asking him why he came back here. But the leader just keeps digging his grave deeper and declares that he will kill Gobro for wounding his pride. Some of the elf girls apologize for their leader's foolishness, since they tried to talk him out of coming here, but he refused to listen to them at all. Since it's not entirely the troops' fault that their leader is an idiot, he decides that they will fight one-on-one mock battles against the goblins here, and all the elves that win their battles will be spared. Although the leader is going to be killed no matter what, long story short, of the 23 elf soldiers, only 6 were defeated, and Gobro may or may not have rigged the matches so that all the male elves lost so that he would have the elf girls to himself, but that's besides the point. He eats all the elf men, gaining some extra skills from them, and now that that's done, he addresses the surviving elf women and tells them that they all need to surrender their weapons and magic items because they are being held as prisoners now. The elf girls are shocked because they thought they would be set free if they won their mock battles, but Gobro isn't so kind as to forgive people who came here with the intent of killing him. Gobji is already thrusting in excitement since he believes he will finally get to go balls deep with some elf girls, but Gobro imposes the no-touch rule again, so the elves won't have to worry about any other goblins. Gobji can accept it since Gobro is the boss in the village, but Gobji still asks if he can get some action since he's so pent and Gobro feels kind of bad for him. Gobro still has to execute the elf leader, and he's got something special planned for him. Later on, Gobakichi reaches level 100 while out hunting, and as a result he evolves into a more powerful version of himself. The rest of the goblins are in awe of his new physique, especially Gobro, who is glad he has someone on his level once more. Gobokichi has become a special variant as well, and his iron-hard crimson skin is a result of blessings from the demigod of flame and war. So he's become really tough, and the first thing he wants to do now that he has evolved is spar with Gobro, to which Gobro is more than happy to take him up on that offer. They begin sparring, and Gomakichi is definitely able to take a few hits from Gobro, but ultimately he still lacks the skills to really contend and gets defeated fairly easily. While Gobro may have won the battle, he is still impressed with Gobakichi for catching up to him in the first place, so he is glad he has a rival to keep him on his toes. Afterward, Gobro feels exhausted from all the fighting he had done with Gobakichi, so he takes a break in the cave. But he is then approached by a shadowy figure which apologizes for not being able to prepare more for him and gives him an unknown skill. Gobro wakes up from the encounter, and it turns out to have been a weird dream, but he is still left wondering what it could have meant. On day 51, Gog drags Gobro over so he can get a good look at all the progress the goblins have been making while he wasn't paying attention. Maybe it's because they felt left behind after Gobakichi became an ogre as well, with 4 more goblins have become hobgoblins. One has been assessed to have enough talent to become a mage, while another seems to have the talents necessary to become a cleric. This is Gobji, and he promises to do his best to help the goblin community as much as possible. And in other news, Habza got even hotter. She has evolved into a half-spell lord, but she's got some markings on her body which reminds Gobro of the marks he has, but they leave that discussion for later as Habzi is itching to test out how much extra power she has gained from her evolution. So they both head outside where Habzi casts a volley of flame spells which set the forest ablaze. The two ignore the forest fire they just started, and Habzi says she feels like she could cast another 20 spells just like that, but before she can cause any more collateral damage, Gobro says that's enough for today. With her being a half-spell lord, she isn't as strong as she would be as full-spell lord, but she is likely going to evolve into one next time. However, for now, to celebrate her evolution, Gobro presents her with some new legendary gear. The rate at which goblins have been evolving seems really high compared to how it normally goes, and Gobro is mostly certain that it's because of his influence on the way the goblins train, but even though the general population has grown stronger, there are still those who aren't able to keep up. Later on, Gobro and Gobakichi are returning from a successful hunt when they run into a group of the older generation goblins, and they say they have had enough of living in the goblin village since they are the older ones, but all the goblins that are 2 months old are getting stronger than them. And on top of that, Gobro is the only one who ever gets laid, so they want to leave and start something new for themselves. To their surprise, Gobro has no issues with them leaving since they didn't steal any stuff, and he even goes out of his way to provide them with a knife made of mithril to help them with their journey. On another occasion, Gobro came across an orc that was dragging a human body home. The guy is already dead, so there's nothing Gobro could do to save him, so he kills the orc to avenge him. And while he may have a rule against killing humans unless absolutely necessary, he still takes a bite out of the dead guy to see what he gets. He manages to acquire a monster tamer skill from him. Later, Gobro is working on an idea to make earrings with his blood in them so he can communicate with others, so once they are completed, the earrings are implemented in training. Gobro talks to Gobmi through the earring, and she is amazed that she can actually hear him loud and clear. So with confirmation that the idea works, he made enough for all the goblins to use. As the day progressed, hunting went on as usual, and Gog seems to have gotten a lot stronger since she is now able to knock out a Tri-Horn in one blow. Since he is still in one piece, Gobro thinks this is a perfect subject to try out his new Monster Tamer skill on, and once he's done, a Tri-Horn is made into a loyal pet for Gami. Gobro goes on to tame a lot more animals over the course of that day. On the 59th day, Gobro sets things up so that the red-haired girl can train by fighting kobolds one-on-one. She sits down for a break with Gobro, and as he is eating, she asks if she can have a bit of his meat. Gobro doesn't mind and hands her the drumstick, but as she takes a bite from it, she pauses for a moment because she just unlocked a new job class. Her job is called Nor Soldat, and it gives her boosts that allow her to move like this, with the only caveat being that she needs to eat monster meat occasionally or she will die. That night, Gobro is woken up when his detection skill alerts him to dozens of kobolds heading this way. They are being chased by something, but he can't tell what it is, so for now, he has all the goblins ready to defend against whatever threat may be coming and tells them to leave the kobolds alone since they are the victims in this case. As the kobolds run past them, it is revealed that they were being chased by magically animated skeletons, so Gobro ordered Gobmi and her team to open fire. They do as instructed, but the arrows have no effect on the skeletons, and at this rate, they are going to end up getting overrun. There is clearly something creating these skeletons, so they'll need to take it out if they want this to end, but for now, Gobro tells everyone to drop their weapons and throw hands because smashing the skeletons is the only way to slow them down. Smashing the skeleton works, but they can't keep this up forever if the skeletons don't stop coming, and this is where Gobro comes in because he is going after the one creating the skeletons. He dashes for the entrance while ripping through the skeleton horde in front of him, so after only 7 seconds, he finally gets to the greater skeleton that is summoning the rest of the skeletons and punches a hole through it. Once the main skeleton has been defeated, Gobro takes a bite out of its head, which gives him a bunch of new undead skills, and as he returns to the cave, he is greeted by all the kobolds who have now started referring to him as their lord. The kobolds were out mining when they accidentally dug into Velvet's treasury and set off its guardian, a greater skeleton. So the only thing they could think of to survive was to run for the cave of the terrifying ogre they've been trying to avoid. Their story makes sense to Gobro, but he reminds them that he has been killing a lot of their kind for a while now. So are they really sure they still want him as their lord? But the kobolds are fully aware and want to serve him regardless. At this point, Gobro has gathered humans, elves, and kobolds, so while he didn't intend for it at first, he admits that things have gotten pretty interesting around here. The next day, Gobro went out hunting with Govakichi for the first time in a while, but as they were heading into the forest, they spotted a team of 12 humans moving through the forest quickly, so Gobro changed plans and decided that they should follow the humans. They chase after the humans quietly, and by eavesdropping, Gobro is able to learn that the humans are planning to kidnap the daughter of the elf chief. Their target is the group of elves that will be returning from a festival today, and they got the necessary information from traders among the elf tribe. 2 hours after sunset, the convoy arrives, and Gobro is stunned by how beautiful the elf princess is, even by elf standards. But then the human attack begins, and 2 elves of the convoy immediately get headshot. Govakichi wants to go help them, but Gobro stops him since this fight has nothing to do with him. The humans then proceed to take the elves down, and when they finally grab the princess, Gobro changes his mind and decides to save them, but totally not because he sees a chance to add a new member to his harem. After taking down the humans, Gobro and Govakichi grab all the bodies of the survivors and carry them back to the cave, where one of the captured humans confesses everything he knows so that Gobro will spare him. Apparently, the war with the elves is going to begin within 20 days, but while that information was definitely useful, the soldier is unfortunately a man, so he isn't eligible for the harem. In unrelated news, Gobro gains the skills of several soldiers, and then he turns to Elf Princess who had just woken up. She is scared the first time she sees Gobro, and she seems to be a bit different from the other elves since she has wings. She is confused about everything that happened, so he tries to calm her down by saying he won't hurt her, but she was more concerned about getting back shots from him. After Gobro clears up the misunderstanding, he sits down and has some tea with the princess. But she is pissed that Gobro just hid in the bushes and watched her men get killed before deciding to do anything. It's reasonable for her to be angry about his actions, but then again, Gobro does not care. He doesn't like getting involved in quarrels between the humans and goblins unless there is a pretty girl involved, of course. Besides, if she's got time to be crying over her dead men, then she would be better off using it to find the traitors among her people who ratted out her location. The news that some of her people may be traitors only makes her cry even more, so Gobro tells her to get some rest for tonight, and in the morning, they'll escort her back to her tribe. On a side note, Gobje is still as down bad as before, but Gobro won't let him go anywhere near the elf princess. The next morning, Gobro leaves early to escort the princess back to the elf tribe, And while they are walking, he asks about her wings and is told that they are something that only high elves have. This is an evolved version of an elf who is able to fly with the wings, although the princess says the wings are usually hidden within their bodies, so outsiders don't see them often. After that, they continue walking for another 3 hours until they finally reach the elf village, but they are immediately held at arrow point by dozens of elves in the trees. And these guys aren't messy around because their arrows are made of mithril and would be a serious threat to Gobro, although he could probably handle a couple of shots. The elf princess steps up and tells the archers to back off since Gobro and Gobakichi are the ones who saved her. The archers are confused, but eventually, Gobro and Gobakichi are allowed to meet with the village chief. The chief thanks Gobro for saving his daughter since she is the most important thing to him, but Gobro cuts straight to the chase and says he didn't save her out of kindness or anything, he wants a reward. The village chief believes it is fitting to reward the man who returned his daughter to him safely, so he calls for an attendant to bring over a magic item. The item is called Failnot, and it is an heirloom of the elf family, so the princess asks if he is sure he really wants to give that up, but he believes it is decent compensation for the service Gobro has done him. Gobro is glad to see that the elf chief isn't a cheapskate when it comes to things that matter, so he tells the chief that he has some information that may be useful regarding the upcoming war with the humans. Upon hearing this, the chief realizes that this may be a mutually beneficial relationship he is going with Gobro, and as additional compensation, Gobro is given some mithril materials, some weapons, and 2 shovels, which probably do something special. After the deal was made, the chief says he has something he wants to ask Gobro about. It has been a long time since the elite troop of elves went out, and he hasn't heard back from them, so he was wondering if Gobro knew anything about that. Gobro knows who the chief is referring to, but since he already killed and eaten most of the team, he nervously laughs while denying any involvement with them. The chief has no reason to believe Gobro is lying, so he accepts what he says, but before they leave, he gives Gobro an extra gift. Several barrels of alcohol, and that was all Gobro needed to be willing to help them out if they are ever in trouble again. Back at the cave, Gobro is really enjoying the alcohol, so he intends to do everything in his power to stay on friendly terms with the elves. And the others are glad to see that he is happy, but Gobmi feels something off about herself today. By the next morning, Gobro gets out of bed and he tries waking Gobmi up, but he finds that she has evolved into a Damfer overnight. So after getting herself a new change of clothes, she's finally able to show off to Gobro. With her evolution, she is now able to create large amounts of ice, which is a useful ability, but she also needs to wear magic-blocking glasses because she also acquired an evil eye that makes others fight among themselves. In other news, Go became a half-Earth lord with abilities that allow her to manipulate Earth, spot weaknesses in Bedrock, and play Minecraft without a pickaxe. Hobsetto has also evolved, but in her case, she's become a half-blood lord, and as such, she is able to control blood and use it as a weapon. But Gobro is still a bit curious about how all the evolved hobgoblins have the same kinds of marks on their bodies that he does. And they all say they feel their power emanating from that spot, so Gobro wants to look into this further when he gets the chance. With all the new evolutions that have been happening, Gogji decides to rename them, so now Hobsetto will be known as Bloodsetto, Gobmi as Bami, Gob as Earth, and Hobsi as Spelsi. He also renames Gobakichi as Ograkichi and Gobro as Ogro. He doesn't really like the new name, but all that matters is that everyone knows who's who, so he leaves it at that. With the new evolutions, the chart of the most powerful races in the cave has been updated, and Dami is at the top of the list right now. Once the war with the humans begins, the elves will turn to Ogro for help, and when that time comes, having more subordinates at his disposal will allow him to engage in more tactical operations. With that being the case, he began to distribute more of his communication earrings among the different species, but when it came to the elves, they were unwilling to put anything on unless Ogro put something in. So for the rest of that night, the soundproof room was put to good use. With everyone now on board with the training, the size of the daily training group has grown rather large, so Ogro came up with an idea to have them all fighting in controlled matches with an undead he creates, so they all can gain some experience. The skeleton he summons has dark bones and heavy armor, which indicates that it is powerful based on the equipment it spawns with. All the elves end up losing to the skeleton in battle. The undead were useful as training dummies, but the fact that they burn up as soon as they are exposed to sunlight really doesn't leave many options on how to use them during the day. For now, Ogro is focusing his efforts on training the elves and kobolds to improve their skills, especially the kobolds, since they are currently pretty low on the power scaling board, so if they don't get their act together, it's going to be hard for them to keep up. The next day, he has the kobolds practice group hunting, and honestly, they did a lot better than he expected them to because they managed to catch 20 wolves in one session, so they were able to tame them with his skill. After returning to the cave, Obru was pleasantly surprised to find that his axe that was damaged in the fight against the Red Bear has been upgraded. The entire thing has been modified with all kinds of mithril alloys and spirit stones, so Obru is really impressed with her work. He asks when she learned how to make stuff like this, so she explains that she recently ranked up to an elemental smith, and for her achievement, she wants a special reward from Ogru. The next day, they were meant to go out for some additional training, but Abrakichi has something important he wants to discuss with Ogru. He asks Ogru to swear not to laugh at him, but he has always had a crush on Earthy, and now that she's become an Earth Lord, that voluptuous body is making him feel some type of way. However, he has no idea how to talk to her, so he really needs Obru's help with this one, and Obru feels like his time has finally come to be a big brother. Obru teaches Abrakichi everything there is to know about getting the girl, but he's got to do it tonight. There's no point in leaving it for later, and if he ends up getting rejected anyway, the worst she can say is no. He tells Abrakichi to let him know how it goes with Earthy, and after Abrakichi confesses to her, long story short, he gets laid. The next morning, Abrakichi is fighting with Obru again, and today he's feeling a lot lighter than before and is much happier, all thanks to Ogru's advice. After training as usual, they head out to begin hunting, and today there are a bunch of new insect monsters that Obru had never seen before, so he wanted to gather as many as possible to help make some armor plating. He also eats some as well and is able to acquire the skill of exoskeleton. So he tries it out, and his body is immediately covered in really tough armor. It holds up well against strikes and it repairs minor damage quickly as well, so it would be really useful in battle. But he doesn't like how obvious it looks, so he takes it off. Unfortunately, it looks like the armor was created using his clothes, so that jacket is just gone now. But this also teaches Ogru that he is able to register and recall forms that may be useful to him. So after getting some new pants, he creates an aerial form using some beetle skills he had acquired, and with it, he is now able to fly, although it's going to take some practice before he is really good at it. The following day, it rained, so no one could go out at all. However, that didn't stop the redhead from asking Obru to train with her. He used to think of her as a cute puppy, but now she's more like a Doberman with how powerful she has become. After training, Obru headed over to the blacksmith to see how things are going on her end, and lately she's been working with the elves to develop more interesting weapons with mithril. For example, she developed a new rapid-fire crossbow, and Obru is really impressed with the work she has put in. After that, he went to go check on the chef sisters, and their skills have improved as well, so Obru attempts to get them to recreate some foods from his past life like potato chips, and the sisters are more than happy to try anything he suggests. Next up on his checklist is a check-in with the alchemist to see how her research on potions and magic tools is going, and she seems to have created a magic item that can freeze a person in place if they are hit with it, and she is really proud of her creation, so she wants a reward from him. However, the other girls catch wind of this reward, so Obru has to spend the entire night with them. The next day, Obru gets called because there are some strange elves at the entrance to the cave, so he heads out and meets this elf who asks to have a chat with him. He's here to ask for Obru's assistance because the human army is advancing into the forest, and since he is being much nicer than the last guy, and the compensation is bound to be worthwhile, so Obru accepts the request. Later, he gathers all the strongest forces he has at his disposal and tells them that from this day forward, they are now a mercenary group, and they shall be called the Parabellum Mercenary Company, so it is time for them to head out on their first job. Early in the morning of day 71, they all head out on their first official mission as Parabellum, and for the special occasion, Obru decided to have 36 of them partake. With Spelsey's ability, they were also able to bring along their familiars, so in reality, there are more like 73 attackers in this group. The reason they made their move so early in the morning is because one of Obru's blood scouts managed to locate a human army encampment, so that will be their primary target for today. The group arrives at the encampment and they come across a barrier that has been detected around the camp. It is made to keep all monsters out, so Spelsey suggests that they destroy it immediately so they can begin their attacks. To that end, Obru orders everyone to get into position and surround the barrier in preparation for their slaughter, and once they are all in their optimal spots, he uses his gauntlet to fire an arrow which shatters the barrier in an instant. All the human soldiers are left in a state of confusion after they witness their protective barrier crumble to pieces, but they are in for much worse as Earthy creates a rock wall to prevent them from escaping. And now that the humans are trapped, Dami and Spelsey carpet bomb them with powerful magic attacks. And just to be really sure that every human here dies, Obru summons a ton of skeleton soldiers and begins spamming his anti-barrier arrows at the soldiers. However, even with the insane number of attacks that they were just hit with, the human side isn't simply going to give up, so they launch their own counterattack and take down a few of the skeletons. Obru first spots the female knight commander for the humans, and he is already considering having her join his harem if he gets the chance, But before any of that, he wants to have a good battle, so he lets out a loud roar to draw all attention to him. Once the Knight Commander spots Ogru, she orders her troops to concentrate their attacks on him since he is the one controlling the army of undead. Her troops then begin making a path for her to get to Ogru, and as the commander charges forward, one of the soldiers casts a buff in her to allow her to move through the horde quickly. Ogru realizes the commander has good situational awareness and her decision-making skills aren't bad either since she's trying to go straight for Ogru's heart. Although that doesn't mean the attack will work on him though. The Knight Commander is repelled and thrown several feet back into the arms of her troops. After everything he has seen from her, Ogru has made the decision that she will be a fine addition to his harem, so he is going to capture her alive rather than simply kill her. The commander doesn't like Ogru's condescending tone, so she states that she will kill him instead. Her fiery spirit just makes Ogru like her even more, so he now wants her even more. The commander realizes that there's no point in arguing with words over this, so she tells Ogru to do his worst, and if he manages to beat her, then she gives him permission to do whatever he wants with her. Ogru doesn't say anything more because he has already dismounted his bear to play 1 versus 1. Before he starts, he gives orders to his team to not kill the skilled members of the commander's special unit because they may be useful later on. They are free to kill or eat anyone else though. In the following minutes, a massacre of horrific proportions took place. It is already pretty much expected that no one will be able to compete with Aokichi in terms of strength, but then we see Dami using her bewitchment spell, and even she is scared by the power she possesses. One look at her eyes and all the soldiers become tier 3 simps who are willing to kill anything that moves for her, including themselves, and once a good number of the soldiers are already dead, Bloodsedo steps in and steals their blood to make weapons that will be used to kill even more soldiers, so the battle ended in a pretty one-sided victory. But back on Ogru's end, the commander's sword actually managed to touch him. It's an insignificant wound and it won't do much to help her win this battle, but it is still impressive to him that a human like her managed to touch him at all. Just then, the commander's mage executes the kamikaze option since this battle is an obvious loss, so he casts a Flame and Dragon spell which even Ogru would probably not be able to withstand if he took it head-on. The commander already knows this battle is hopeless, so she is prepared to let herself die if it means that Ogru will be taken down as well. However, as the spell approaches, Ogru pulls her out of the way and says he won't be letting her throw her life away. So he turns his back to the Flame and Dragon spell and casts several layers of shields in rapid succession with varying effects. It's not a perfect technique, but it was effective in neutralizing the dragon, so the results of this battle come out as an overwhelming victory for Parabellum. He is really proud of himself for managing to capture such a skilled swordswoman, so he's going to make sure to put her sword handling skills to good use later. Since they are done here, Ogru calls for everyone to get ready so they can head back to their cave, but not before Ogru has eaten all the human corpses and gained a ton of their skills. A while later, the elf chief shows up at Ogru's cave with the wine Ogru loves so much, and a party was held between the elves and goblins to celebrate the halting of the human army. Since his own troops were late to respond to the human forces, the chief decided it would be fitting to bring alcohol, so they can at least celebrate the victory. Ogru has no complaints since he gets to drink even more savory wine, but while the party was still going on, he went to the back of the cave to see how his prisoners are holding up. And the 2 women he brought back seemed to be just about ready to give in to him. He may have done a little bit of aphrodisiac drugging to make them more cooperative, but Ogru gave up things like morality a long time ago, so anything goes as long as he gets new additions to his harem. The Knight Commander tries to hold out by saying she's a noblewoman, so she would never allow herself to breed with an ogre, but from the look on her deputy's face, I don't think that stopped Ogru from doing his thing. By the next day, Ogru sat down with the Knight Commander and put one of his communication earrings on her, and with its effects, she wasn't able to lie to him at all, so he managed to gather a lot of really useful information about the human army. Not for his sake, but rather because the elf elder doesn't want to have to be relying on Ogru so often, since this is a problem that the elves ultimately need to deal with on their own. Which is why he offered to buy any information Ogru is able to get from his prisoners. He offers Ogru 10 more barrels of wine as payment, and Ogru can never say no to good wine. After acquiring the information from the Knight Commander, he relayed everything to the elf elder through his communication bracelet. He informs them that the humans are planning to ambush the elf village from 3 separate directions to overwhelm their forces. So on the day that the attack is meant to take place, Ogru and Aokichi got there early to lay out a bunch of traps, and then they just waited for the humans to arrive. As they spotted the 500 soldiers marching along the path, Ogru gave the signal for the road to block off with trees, and after that, the rest of the goblins proceed to roll boulders down on top of them, instantly cutting their numbers down to 300. And then Nemi's long range started their rain of arrows, which further diminished the number of soldiers till they were below 100. However, it was at this point that the commanding knight realized that they were at a disadvantage, so he ordered his surviving troops to build a wall with all the rocks and dead bodies they can find, and after hunkering down, they managed to fight back against the goblins until it became a stalemate. Ogru was impressed by the intelligence of the commanding knight, so he asks Akechi to charge down there himself and see if he can capture the commanding knight alive. Akechi charges down there and inside the makeshift fortress starts fighting with the knight commander. The knight gets knocked back, but even in the face of Akechi's overwhelming strength, he was still able to smile. Akechi tries to strike him down, but the knight ducks under and counters with a strike of his own, forcing Akechi to have to go on the defensive. Ogro has been watching this whole thing, and for once he actually seems to be interested in the ability of someone outside of adding them to his harem. Even if Akechi has instructions not to kill him, he still finds it impressive that human can hold out in a 1v1 against him. Although it doesn't last long since Akechi eventually knocks him out anyway. They are done with their mission now, so Ogro plans to report their victory to the Elf Elder and return to base after eating the corpses as usual. But once he is done with that, Demi comes up to him and asks for some special baby batter treatment tonight, which Ogro is happy to provide. The next day, the prisoners of war are all held in the cell together, and two other guys are lamenting over the humiliation of their situation. The red-haired commander tells them to shut up since this place isn't actually that bad considering they get good food and a place to stay. They don't agree with the sentiment, but while the other guys were nobles, the redhead was a commoner, so this is actually better than the way he got treated back in the human kingdom. Later on, Ogro questions the redhead on the reason why the human kingdom chose to invade the elves, so he explains that the princess of one of the human lands fell ill with a disease that has a 99% fatality rate, but she was set to get married to the emperor, so the emperor ordered a nationwide search for a cure for this disease. Eventually, they heard of a medicine that could cure all diseases, but it could only be found in the elf village, so naturally, the next logical step was to invade them without trying to negotiate. Ogro now understands the reason the war started, and it all boils down to human greed, although he kind of understands the human's point of view since he was once human himself. At the same moment, Earthy was busy mining to expand the cave, but after she hit a crack, a lot of water suddenly started pouring out of the cave and onto the floor. Everyone rushes in to check on her and see if she's hurt, but it turns out they just hit a pocket of water in the caves, and Ogro knows exactly what to do with it. After a few short hours of work, Ogro has completed construction on the first ever Goblin cave bathhouse, and immediately after it is complete, everyone takes a break to have a soak inside the relaxing bath. The next day, Ogro had an idea to improve the fighting capabilities of his troops, so he brought out the soldiers he had captured and set them up to train alongside his own men. This way, those who are less experienced should be able to learn a lot quicker by watching how an actual trained soldier would perform the task. So a simulated war was fought with Dami and Spelsey as the commanders and a mix of the different species as the soldiers. As the day's training continued, the nobleman prisoners got tired, but the redhead was still full of energy, so he goes up to Ogro and asks to have a match with him. Ogro admires the spirit of the young man, so he agrees to fight him, but to make sure he doesn't accidentally punch his body to pieces, he gives him a few buffs to enhance his strength and durability. After doing this, Ogro gets ready and begins his fight with the redhead, but while he was putting up a fight at first, Ogro soon demonstrates why he's the strongest person in this cave by knocking him out cold. Once the match is over, Ogro begins healing him so he doesn't stay paralyzed, and while he's doing this, Akechi comes running up to him and asks to fight Redhead next. Ogro isn't opposed to it, and Redhead seemed to like the idea as well, since a few moments later, he is fighting Akechi with a smile on his face, and he seems to be holding his ground a lot better. After training is done for the day, everyone sits down to eat lunch, and Redhead is currently eating with Ogro. He mentions how he originally came from a land with a lot of demi-humans living there, so he can't understand why the nobles here hate demi-humans so much. Here, all the races are able to live in harmony, and he can tell that Ogro is able to maintain order well, so he gets up and swears his loyalty to him. Ogro has a soft spot for diligent people like Redhead, so he releases him from being a prisoner and appoints him as the master of the other Redhead, so that he can train her in the ways of fighting like a human. Ogro has added another skilled soldier to his ranks, but the other noblemen aren't really worth keeping, so he asks the Elf Elder to take them off his hands. The Elder agrees to take them, but before he goes, Ogro asks him about the special medicine that the humans were after since he wants to know a bit more about it, but the Elder tells him that it was already given to him as a gift when he brought back the Elf Princess. Ogro doesn't understand why he would give something as precious as this if he is willing to fight a war over it, but the Elder just has a grudge against humans, so there's no reason he can't give it to someone like Ogro. Ogro then takes a sip of this mythical medicine, and with his ability, he gains a skill for enhanced regeneration, as well as the ability to make his blood into medicine. To test it out, he uses it on one of the injured commanders, and with a single drop, all his wounds are instantly healed, so Ogru is left wondering if there is really no limit to how powerful he can get. This was the end of episode 6. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to not miss the next part.